A report from the New York City Rent Guidelines Board suggested that landlords would need at least an 8.25% increase on rents for 1 year leases and a 15.75% increase for 2 year leases. But now that the actual numbers that they're suggesting are coming out, they're recommending between 2 and 5%, which doesn't even keep pace with inflation. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting update for you today, and it's going over what the Rent Guidelines Board in New York City is suggesting that the rent increase for landlords could be for the next year or two in some cases, right? So I did a video a little over a week ago saying that, hey, they did a report. They found that the cost and the expenses for landlords are a lot higher than they have been in the past. And they said, okay, well, landlords are going to need to raise their rent more than 8% for 1 year leases and more than 15, almost 16% for 2 year leases, right? And of course, that caused panic amongst the tenants. They don't ever want their rent to increase anything, but landlords are like, hey, this is the truth. We are facing the same effects of inflation as you are. Our expenses are going up, and we need a rent increase that large. Now, as I mentioned in that video before, they were recommendations so that they could make a decision going on into the future. This wasn't the decision that they made. And now that you see, more of the story unfolding, you can see that they are not going to get that big rent increase like they thought. And it's going to be probably closer to 2% because they don't care what the actual expenses landlords are facing are. That doesn't mean anything to them. It's all political. It has nothing to do with inflation. It has nothing to do with what actual costs are going up. The only thing it has to do with is, oh, can we make our political allies happy? Can we make these people who are going to vote for us reelect us? Because they're not going to get reelected if they allow the Rent Guidelines Board to pass some high price or some high rent increase for landlords. Okay, so landlords are not going to make out well, and it's going to end up costing everybody because when the landlords aren't able to increase their rents, properties fall into disrepair. That's what I keep saying. I want to emphasize this because I know I have a lot of tenants watching these videos and they're just sitting there like, oh, well, the landlords are all rich. No. Okay. Well, the landlords are all big mega corporations. No. Okay. There's more small landlords than you can imagine. There's the mom and pop owners are the ones who suffer the most. And yes, there are mom and pop owners of rent controlled buildings in New York City. This isn't fantasy world. There are a lot of people out there who own real estate, either by saving up and purchasing it and hoping that it would be a good investment. Maybe they wanted to buy the building that they used to live in and they, provide nice affordable homes for their neighbors and friends. But there are so many different situations out there, and you are basically hurting good landlords and hurting them so bad that they could be pushed into financial ruin. Okay, and that's idiotic in my opinion. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. If you believe that landlords are going to get the short end of the stick in New York City, go ahead and put a comment down below what you think the rent increases that they're going to allow is going to be. Okay, I think it's going to be on the low end. I think it's going to be at 2% because they're going to say, oh, well, tenants, they can't afford more than this 2% rent increase. Meanwhile, the landlords can't afford the 8% plus in inflated costs that they are facing. On top of that, I'm reading articles and, like the ridiculousness of New York is hilarious to me. And I read that the state of New York has now made it so that new buildings can no longer have gas hookups. And they're going to slowly, add that or go back and hit the old buildings and make it so that, hey, they got to get rid of their gas hookups. No natural gas in the old buildings as well. So they want to add all these additional costs onto existing buildings and then expect the landlord to eat those costs without allowing them to have a price increase in their rents. Idiotic. But anyway, let's get into this article because it goes over a few of the details a little bit better than I can. This article is coming from baynews9.com and it says, chaotic scene unfolds at the Rent Guidelines Board vote. And it's a ridiculous story because even though they really cut back the amount of rent, the suggested rent increase, right? Tenants still aren't happy. They want the rents to be rolled back. Okay, they want to cut the rents. Something that would basically bankrupt every landlord in the city if they did that. But anyway, let's get into the story. The Rent Guidelines Board voted Tuesday night on a preliminary range of increases for rent stabilized tenants in the city amid a chaotic scene in Manhattan. The board approved a rent increase between 2 and 5% on 1-year leases and between 4 and 7% on 2-year leases, according to Mayor Eric Adams. The final vote was 5-4. While we are reviewing the preliminary ranges put forward by the Rent Guidelines Board this evening, I want to be clear that a 7% rent increase is clearly beyond what renters can afford and what I feel is appropriate this year, Adams said. That's BS, okay? The mayor there is just another, progressive trying to get votes, okay? That's the only reason he's saying that. So, what is a 7% rent increase? Just in case people don't realize how minuscule a 7% rent increase is, I'm talking about if you have $1,000 a month rent, increasing it by 7% is $70. So it would be $1,070. And that's the high end of what they would allow, okay? On the low end, it would be a 2%. Okay? Keep that in mind. A 2% on $1,000 is $20 a month. And these tenants aren't happy. Okay? They're, oh no, I can't afford an additional $20 a month. Hey, I can't afford to pay all of your bills for you and then keep this building in good repair. Okay, so if the furnace or it just stops working, if the boiler, I guess in a lot of those older buildings they have boilers. If it stops working, well, it might be a while before I'm able to get the new boiler up in there. If the roof starts leaking, well, you're just going to be wet because I can't afford to repair the roof based on this rent that you have. And not only is this price or this rent increase too low, the Rent Guidelines Board has kept the rent increases for the last few years below inflation. In fact, there was a time when they said, oh, well, we're not going to allow any rent increase at all. I believe there was a 3-year period. So landlords are already behind, and you're not even going to let them make up for the amount of inflation just from this year. You're screwing landlords over, okay? But I'm not surprised. This is going to be, the end result of socialism is, simply put, right? You have a worse product, right? Dilapidated, horrible buildings, and it's run by an inefficient government that has no clue how business operates, right? And people are just going to be, living in slums, and that's not what I want to see. Okay, when you talk about buildings that are maintained by landlords who are able to make a profit, they are in good shape. They are in good shape. And you can't tell me that every single landlord out there is just being greedy. No, they invested money and they deserve to make a profit for investing that money. If they don't deserve to make a profit, if that's what the tenants believe, that a landlord doesn't deserve to make a profit, well, guess what? Landlords are going to say, well, then I'm not going to invest my money. You can't force me to, own this building. You can't force me to build a new building. You can't force me to do that, okay? Instead, I'm going to put my money somewhere else, maybe in a business, or maybe I'll buy self-storage, or maybe I'll just buy in a different state, Apartment buildings in Texas are still able to make a profit on. I can raise my rents whatever I want. So why am I wasting my time here in New York with these stupid rent control laws? Anyway, let's continue. Immediately following the vote, the scene at Cooper Union turned chaotic as tenant advocates stormed the stage. Several individuals surrounding the board, which was seated at a table on the stage, holding signs and chanting, "Rent rollback!" Board members reportedly sat in silence while waiting for protesters to finish. Last year, the board also voted in favor of increasing rents between 2 and 4% for 1 year leases and between 4 and 6% for 2 year leases. Yeah, well, inflation last year was like 8% as well. So, already, like I said, landlords are already behind. And look at the ridiculousness of these tenants, okay? They're saying, oh, these rent increases are too much. Roll the rent back. You know, the entitlement of these individuals is almost unfathomable. Okay, I can hardly believe that people are so naive. They have no clue what it costs to run these buildings. I mean, it must be a nightmare. I am so glad I don't own anything there because the expenses, the bureaucracy, all of the permits and garbage you have to deal with the city of New York, it's just not worth it. And then you throw this rent control stuff on top of it. They think landlords are evil. Man, it makes it so a good landlord just wants to get out of the business. And the bad landlords, they are going to do everything possible to take advantage of the situation. They're going to do some unlawful things. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see people, breaking the law and breaking the rules, but the city is setting itself up for failure by putting these sort of policies in place. And these tenants, they only have their own best interest in mind. They don't care about what the effect on the city is going to be. They don't care about the effects on other tenants who are looking for housing. They don't care about the fact that they're bankrupting landlords. They don't give a crap about anything except for I get to keep my cheap rent forever. So goodness, bad news for landlords up in New York. Not surprising though. This is what I was saying in the last video. Basically, there's no way that they're going to allow rent increases as high as 16% to pass.